let you see. Wow. Yes. So I'm Chisa Penix Brown, and I am the hostess with the mostest that is bringing you Give It to the People Live. It is a live show where we talk to BIPOC businesses and women owned businesses in order to just really find out what is going on with them and how they can enhance your life. So we focus on mental wealth, which is getting your mind right and your money right. So just know that every guest that we bring on is going to have some aspect of that inside of their conversation. Today, we're going to be talking about women. We're going to be talking about entrepreneurship. We're going to be talking about blackness. And we're also going to be talking about leadership. And so I'm going to bring on our guest for today so that this way you can get all the goods that we promise and let her introduce herself. So good day, beautiful.
Hey, how you doing, Chisa?
I am marvelous. So I just want to let you introduce yourself, tell
Okay.
people a little bit of background about you, and then we're going to get into some questions.
Okay, sounds good. So I am Dr. Shinika McKiever. I am the Chief Creative Officer of the McKeever Group Creative Company. And so I do quite a few things, but in a nutshell, I work closely with my clients to help them create purpose-driven strategies. And what that means is helping them strategically align their purpose and passion in a way that they're, just kind of moving with intention and making sure that everything that they do has purpose and passion behind it. So I work specifically with small businesses, nonprofit organizations, and typically high achieving women.
Okay. And so do you find that with doing that type of work, one of the things that we pride ourselves on over here, Give It to the People, is helping people build confidence. Do you feel like in order for them to find their purpose and their passion, that they do have to be confident about what they're actually doing and what they're bringing into the world?
Yes, that is so true. The confidence piece is really important because at the end of the day, I think what a lot of us tend to forget sometimes is you're the only person that needs to see the vision. And as you know, entrepreneurship is really hard. And a lot of times people like your family and some of the people closest to you, they're not necessarily going to see your vision. So starting out, you have to be confident in who you are as a person, kind of what your experiences are and what you're capable of so that you know that you believe in yourself and that whatever it is that you're pushing forward is going to come together because you believe in it. Because if you don't believe in it or you're not willing to invest in yourself, then guess what? It's not going to work out. So I think the confidence piece is really important. And I think a lot of us, we have it, but sometimes we tend to, kind of bypass it just a little bit when life happens to us.
It does. It does. I mean, and so with that, I want to go into, you mentioned, they can be hard with entrepreneurship.
Right.
So when people are talking about entrepreneurship, I don't know if they realize that they're going into a position of leadership sometimes.
Hmm.
I think that oftentimes people are like, well, look, I don't want to be at my job and I have this skill set so I can do this thing. Or they're like, well, this is what's hot and this is what's selling. So let me go ahead and sell this stuff. Right.
Right.
Oftentimes they don't necessarily look at themselves as leaders. So how would you say that we need to look at redefining leadership, especially when it pertains to entrepreneurs?
Okay, great. So I think, when you look at leadership, a lot of the reason why people struggle with their identity around leadership is because traditional constructs of leadership stem from, the experiences of white males or essentially white supremacy and institutionalized racism. And so therefore, when you look at entrepreneurs, specifically women and people of color, they don't really see themselves in these traditional definitions, although leadership for us looks radically different. So one of my things is that you have to radically redefine how we look at leadership because if we don't, then you're going to continue to have issues, with your talent diversity pipelines, lack of women and people of color in the C-suite, kind of that representation because leadership programs and leadership development, it's not stemmed or rooted from what we need as people of color or women. So I think you have to kind of take a step back, burn kind of those institutionalized systems and really kind of step forward in a way that considers the different experiences that we all bring to the table for leadership to resonate with us. Like when I was doing my dissertation research, one of the things that really jumped out with me was I had a black CPA, a
Mhm.
black female CPA, and when I asked the question, she was like, "No, I'm not a leader." And I'm like, "What? Like you own a CPA firm that you stepped out on faith and that you did yourself, and you don't consider yourself a leader?" Because one of the things that I argued in my study was that the behaviors of successful leaders and successful entrepreneurs, those traits are very similar. So you have to be organized. You have to have, kind of be a visionary. You have to understand systems and processes which require decision making in leadership or entrepreneurship. So I think we have to kind of take a step back and recognize that sometimes leadership is not about what we've been told leadership is. Leadership is about how you show up in your daily life. And I tell people a lot of times when you look at women, for example, if you're a caregiver, if you're a mother, you run a household, you work full time, you run a business, like those are leadership skills. So it's
Mhm.
really just kind of looking at the transferable skill sets that we all have that really translate over to leadership skills in a way that you don't typically look at it. That's kind of how I like to coach. And I think with entrepreneurship is really important because you've got to be able to, in the sense of leadership, get people to buy into the vision of the services that you provide or the product that you're selling, and they have to believe that there's going to be some type of transformation, because if they didn't believe it, they wouldn't purchase it.
Yeah, I mean, and I agree with all of that. And I think that when we're talking about leadership and we're looking at, what you mentioned, the soft skills, those things that are transferable, a lot of times I don't think that they were taught to people in a way that they understood that they were leadership in the first place. So
Right.
when you're talking about being able to define it or redefine it, there has to be something where a person sees that those particular skills are leadership,
Right.
and how they can then give another person that extra oomph that they need
Hmm.
to then do what they're doing. And I think a lot of times with our just the way that we're in leadership is we have to take into consideration that our goal is to impact somebody else to be
Right.
great also, right?
Right.
So it's not just about the fact of me telling you what to do or how to do something, but it's also in the fact of me allowing you the leeway, so to speak, to feel empowered enough to keep going with whatever it is that you were taught, right?
Right.
And whichever direction the team is going. So I think if people could kind of see that a little bit more, then they would understand it. Now, when you talk about, just entrepreneurship, can you give us some of the things that would be possibly challenging to women when they're looking at entrepreneurship and then also trying to be a leader? Because you mentioned that there are some differences. So some of those nuances could definitely cause a person to feel, maybe inadequate, or a lot of people say that imposter syndrome,
Right.
where it's like, I'm not sure, I might be, I could
Right.
possibly be. And unless it is clearly defined, like you mentioned, sometimes they don't see it. So what are some of those challenges that women entrepreneurs go through that would then help them to be more impactful in what they do with their leadership?
Right. So I think with women entrepreneurs, it really can depend. And if you look at, like, black women entrepreneurs, it's the fastest growing segment of entrepreneurs, right? But this is also the group that faces the greatest adversities and challenges due to the intersection of their identities of being black and female is, they have, lack of access to capital, or, resources, or even if they go up for venture capital, they're not typically chosen, or, they're funding their businesses themselves. So that's a particular challenge of just trying to, not necessarily having someone that can write a check for you or make that call, or make that connection, and you're starting from scratch, and a lot of times you're behind the finish line when you get started. So it's an unfair advantage. So I think that's one piece of it. I think the other piece is that women in general, we tend to just juggle a lot of competing demands and priorities. So imagine, I'm single, so I don't have children, but imagine a single mother that may be raising her kids, trying to start a business, may not necessarily have the support she needs in the household to kind of do all these things. Like, that leads to kind of burnout and stress and all these different things, because again, it looks a little bit different. And even there's a lot of women that may be married and still are the primary caregiver in their household, in addition to trying to run their business and potentially also working a full-time job. So it's like, you have to give yourself some grace. I think that is one piece of it, is recognizing that you are not superwoman and you can't do everything, and that you have to rest, because I think the self-care piece can kind of get lost in entrepreneurship, because you're just kind of like go 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 go, and it's like this whole thing of this hustle culture. And someone kind of reframed it for me recently, and it was like, I don't really want to be in a hustle culture, because if you're in a hustle culture, you're always going, you're always hustling to try to figure out the next thing, and you're never taking time to rest. And it's not the goal of entrepreneurship some type of freedom, right? So you've got to build in those freedom days. One of the things that I've noticed for myself is, like, I just have a lot of meetings, and so I may be in meetings all day, and then I'm up super late doing the work, which is kind of like, it's counterproductive, because aren't I'm supposed to be freeing up some time here? So what I've learned is 2023, I'm going to probably implement onto my calendar, and this is a boundaries thing that women struggle with as well, that I'm going to have 2 days a week where I probably don't take meetings. Those are going to be like my administrative or my work days. But that's, again, recognizing a need of, like, girl, you're running yourself to the ground. And I think, again, we pour into other people, and then our cup is constantly on E. And you have to recognize that sometimes you have to take time to pause and, refuel your cup, because if your cup is on empty, then it's going to be very hard for you to pour into anyone else or to lead anyone else into what they need to do. And I think from a leadership perspective, it just goes back to being able to delegate, prioritizing your task. And if you have, within your business and you're able to afford help, I think that's something you need to invest in and getting the help. Because again, if you're trying to do a lot of things at one time, something's not going to get done, or it's not going to get done well. And I think, part of entrepreneurship is, oh, I'm going to multitask, but it's counterproductive because you're doing a lot. You're a busybody, but you're not accomplishing anything. So I think it's just recognizing when you need to pause, building in those self care, and then just having an awareness of yourself and your emotional intelligence levels to kind of like, okay, I'm doing too much and I need to kind of pull it back, or maybe I need to go, go to my therapist and talk about, the feelings that I'm felt, because I think you can get overwhelmed too. And I think the last piece I would add is having your community and a tribe of like people that are kind of in the similar space. Like the past year, I've developed like a lot of entrepreneurial friendships, and those have been great because they understand like I'm struggling with how I want to put this out. I'm not really sure what I want to do. I got an idea, but I'm feeling overwhelmed, and I just need to vent. Versus if I was telling my family, my mom, oh, you'll figure it out. Well, of course I will, but I need someone to sound this off of into that moment. So I think having that community of support is also important.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of that. And you said a whole lot in there. So I'm going to break it down a little bit. I want to start with the part where you talked about the capital and just not being able to access it in a certain way. And I know I tell people, when I do my summits, I've been looking at over the last couple of years, everybody has access to capital. I am so tired of an access to capital panel
Right.
because what they do is they keep talking about the disparity. We already know. What are we going
Uh-huh.
to do to fix it? Right.
Exactly.
And you and I both recently went to the NC Idea Summit that they had
Yes.
about the ecosystem throughout North Carolina. We had a brief conversation at the end of that. And you tell me what your thoughts are on this. My thought, I went to one of the panels, which was actually a really great panel and was my favorite thing, where they were talking about access to capital.
Okay.
However, in this panel, they were basically talking to people that were nonprofit organizations and letting them know how they could get access to this money. In addition to that, I felt like the whole entire summit was built around businesses that they were trying to scale up, which would typically be things that were going to be biomedical, or they were going to be something that was technology based. And
Right.
I felt like it wasn't necessarily speaking to businesses that were similar to yours and mine, because of the fact that and you can agree or disagree, but I definitely want to hear what you have to say. As Black women, often I think that we try to solve a problem, which is what you're
Hmm.
supposed to do in business. However, the problem that we're trying to solve stems around a lot of the things that we face as individuals. So we know that if we're facing it, that there are other
Right.
people that are like us that are facing it, but those may not necessarily be the types of businesses that are going to be able to be scaled to $1 million within the next 2 years. And a lot of times, what that does is that leaves businesses like ours out of that pool. Now, it
Right.
doesn't mean that if you found the right A, B, and C and you connected it together, that our businesses couldn't scale to get to that level. But what I have noticed is that businesses that are similar to what you and I do, if we were white, then what would happen is all of a sudden there would be money coming out of the woodworks to do the same work that we've been doing already. And I
Right.
noticed that counterparts, a lot of times, whenever you're looking at the fact of, oh, well, I started this business a year or two ago, and all of a sudden I'm bankable, right? So for
Right.
me, when I look at that, I look at the connections that are there that we, and I'm just going to, say it as Black women, might be missing because we're not in that circle.
Right.
So the circle is what puts us on the outskirts where we have the challenges, because we don't know this and that person who could just go ahead and write us a check. And oftentimes it seems like their things are more idea driven as opposed to more actual work being done in the community, which is
Right.
what I would see businesses like yours and mine being able to really help these businesses get started and be able to grow. So what are some of your thoughts or your takes on that?
I would agree. So I totally agree with the NC Ideas Conference, and I attended one this summer that was in a very similar vein of it really didn't feel like it was geared towards service providers. And one of the panels that I attended at that conference, someone asked the question around like, how do you, it was about building programs, but nobody
Mhm.
gave you any tools on how to build a program. All they did was talked about their programs. And like you said, the people that look like you and I are looking for like, well, how do I do this in practical steps, like the application piece. And then it was, a little bit of tension when that was called out. Like you just said, you just talking in circles. You haven't given me any real tools. So I think a lot of times, a lot of these conferences, and I will say even with NC Ideas, you look at like their grant program. We can't apply for their grant program because it's not for professional services. But you and I know that the work that we do is vital, especially when it helps, these women owned businesses, especially Black women owned businesses or businesses that are owned by people of color to move up into that next level. They need coaches and people that look like them, that have those same experiences. But like you said, we don't have someone that can write a check or open the door or that is necessarily speaking my name in rooms that I'm not in. I have to work really hard to build those connections and those relationships to get there. So that looks like, I call it playing the game, right? So you got to play the game. And part of, and this is unfortunate, it really is, but I'm just trying to tell you guys, she said, give it to the people. So we're going to keep it real. This is
I'm
how
here for
you break into these spaces. Someone told me today, they said, Shanika, in 2023, your word is that you are a door. So I'm gonna open the door to some of, these lenses of things you need to know. So you've got to understand how to play the game. And part of playing their game is you got to understand all the rules. And not only do you need to understand all the rules, you do not engage to play unless you know you can win.
it.
Because if you're playing games that you can't win, you're going to lose. You're going to lose. And that, there's certain things as women of color that I can't come into a room and just do a lot of talking. I have to sit back and observe. I have to engage, when it's the right moment to engage. And it's an art to it, right? And it's like, making people feel safe because you don't want them to be threatened, or you don't want to be perceived as angry because you show a little emotion when you talk. But it goes back to knowing how to play the games and playing games that you know that you can win, because part of that is, making those connections, making the relationships so that you can start to be in the outlier into that circle, because at some point somebody's going to see you. And I'm a big proponent of, if the space doesn't exist, guess what? I'm creating it. Like, because I'm tired. I don't know about you, Chisa, but I'm tired. I'm tired of conforming. I'm tired of having to dim my light, and I'm tired of, being in mediocre spaces when I have to be twice as good and exceptional. I'm tired.
First of all,
So
we can stop this right now. Listen, let me tell you something. She just said a word on top of a word on top of a word. Okay. So this sounds like, I'm gonna just be honest, just this conversation alone has sparked in my mind. I see a whole entire conference
yes, ma'am.
because you said mediocre spaces. I'm just gonna hold on to that, okay? Because that right there was a word. And, one of the things that I love to put out, every so often is, you didn't wake up to be mediocre. You didn't start this
No.
business to be mediocre. And so for that resonates with me like an internal thing. So, one of my biggest things that I like to do is talk about quality over quantity.
Right.
And, when we're doing our summit that we're doing for next year, we're talking about, that's the theme of it, because I think oftentimes, and specifically now, we kind of have an understanding that we can do more with less, right?
Right.
You talk about something and you see how Twitter just fired so many people, but Twitter is still going. When we
Right.
talk about the lack of resources that we had, and I'm going to just say specifically over this last 3 years with COVID, and people's businesses are still going. Now,
Right.
there are plenty that have shut down, but it could have been that they didn't necessarily understand the leadership and also how to navigate through this lens of technology, right?
Right.
And how to then take that and embrace it and utilize it in a way that would then put their businesses in a place that maybe it hadn't been before.
Right.
And so I do think that, a lot of times we say the word leadership, but when it comes back to our businesses, how do you feel that it impacts, just Black women entrepreneurs in knowing that there will be a shift in how they might need to do business, and the fact that that shift may happen where it is online, where it is having those relationships? I think we've always kind of understood that we needed relationships, but I don't think that we always seek out
Right.
relationships with people that don't look like us, which then causes us to stay kind of siloed. And for me, I like to seek out those relationships that
Right.
don't
You
look
have
like
to.
me. But how do you feel like, it's developing, how it's changing, and that impact on Black women entrepreneurs?
Right. So I think part of it is being able, it's the power of the pivot, right? We're in a space where you have to know when you need to pivot. And I use it from a frame of adaptive leadership. So adaptive leadership is built on four critical competencies. So ability to manage knowledge, Cultural competency, ability to manage knowledge, creating synergy and adaptive vision. And with this particular leadership style, it's all about the adaptation. So
Mhm.
knowing that environments are ongoing, ever changing, and that you can't get too comfortable in it, to know when, sometimes you're just going to have to shift gears, and sometimes it's right in the middle of the problem, because you don't necessarily know what's going to go wrong until you're in it with
What happened?
entrepreneurship, because there's no guidebook. So I think it's just really being open to, sometimes you're going to have to go to plan B, and it's usually when plan A is burning down, and sometimes you just got to burn it down and start all over, and that's okay. But don't get so caught up in a plan or a strategy, or it's got to go this way, that you kind of miss the window opening as the door is closing. So you've just got to be open to pivoting and adapting. And I think for, women entrepreneurs, especially Black women of color, like, we have to be fluid. And I say fluid over flexible, because fluid, water can flow through anything, but
Yep.
then it also has a certain pressure, with water and a rock. That's how how it becomes smooth as it goes down the stream. So, you have to recognize that sometimes you got to break things down in order to build it up. And I think the relationships piece is critical for that. But I also think that is stepping out of your comfort zone, right? So, like, for example, it's like, sometimes, like you said, you have to have the confidence in yourself and your ability to know that I have the knowledge, experience, and expertise to show up in any room that I walk into,
Uh-huh.
and removing, that imposter syndrome. And, like, I had someone say, I don't really like imposter syndrome, because, again, imposter syndrome stems from white supremacy. So who says that you're an imposter, right?
Mhm.
That's something that you embed, or internalize. So if you reject, someone said, I reject the rejection, you reject that notion that you're an imposter, and then you come in as your authentic self in that authentic space in a genuine way, then
Mhm.
who are you impostoring against?
Mhm.
So
It's you know what, I think it's a feeling that people have. I
right,
don't, for me personally, I've done a whole little interview series, on imposter syndrome, and I just don't feel like, for me, I've ever really felt that. And I
right,
think that it is upbringing. I think that it is, like, it just does stem from confidence. And I think that, a lot of times when people do feel like there is imposter syndrome for them, they're trying to be somebody else's ideal version
of
of
who they're supposed
what
to be.
this job is, or this
Right,
title, or whatever. And to me, I just personally, it was a couple years ago, and I started saying, look, I'm just going to ask for what I want,
right,
because that would be, if I said there was any type of imposter syndrome, that probably be the closest thing to it. Because I used to kind of feel people out,
right,
see what was going on first, and then put the ask out front, right? Like, it was like, but the ask might be after 2 or 3 encounters. Let me come check
right,
out and see your vibe. Let me come to your event. Let me see what's going on with you. I don't do that anymore. When I come with the intent of, first of all, I'm here. Okay.
right,
And second of all, let me go ahead and just ask you what I want up front. Like, I don't need to wait forever in order to do that. And
right,
so I think for me, it looks like, when we're talking about kind of this connection between leadership and women entrepreneurs, it looks like asking for what you want up front,
right,
because once you put the ask out there, then a person knows where you're coming from.
uh-huh,
Because I think that there's this misconception that you can't ask immediately. And for me, it was just kind of getting more comfortable with saying, listen, I don't have time for the foolishness and the rigmarole and
right,
bringing flowers and coffee and sugar, right? Like, no, listen, this is what it is. This is what I need up front. And either you're going to be able to provide that or not. What I found out was that cuts out a lot of the time of back and forth. It
right,
also allows a person to kind of see who you are and what you're asking for. And then a third thing is, that person's going to research you anyway. They're going to go,
right.
they're going to look for whoever you are, whoever you're connected to. And so in my world, I like to just tell women in general to be prepared to get the things that you feel like you want.
Right. You got to ask for it up
And
front.
that's where the problem is sometimes you're trying to see what somebody else wants instead of just looking at what you want from a leadership standpoint. And so for me, leadership looks like, I can't help but take over. And I know that may sound,
No, I mean,
I go
some
to
people just
things.
have that bold spirit. Like, when you walk into a room, people are like, "Who is that?"
But I
Like,
can't help it. And I mean it from more so of a actually doing the work standpoint. Like,
right,
I went to something last week, and it amazed me how some people are literally in leadership roles, but then they shy away from the leadership.
Nah.
And it was really a thing where a person said to me that they just want to participate, they don't want to be on Front Street. And
Right.
I'm thinking, but if you are on Front Street, people know about you. It increases your business. It increases the
Right.
brand awareness, and they see you as a leader. They see you as an expert. But instead of you being seen in that light, you want to be seen as a spectator, and I really don't understand that. Like, so for me, what's the connection that's missing for women to decide I am going to step out on leadership and allow people to see me and allow people to then know that I am good at what I do, that I am here and I am valuable, and this is why you should spend money with me.
I mean, I think honestly, it's embracing your power and stop giving that power away, right? Because I think, one of the things my mom always says to me, and probably about 3 or 4 years ago, it finally clicked, was people can only steal your joy if you allow them to.
Yep.
And what I mean by that is stop letting people take your peace of mind, right? And that can be confidence, that can be, how you run your business, any of that. Because when you are confident in who you are as a person, you're aligned in your purpose, you realize that it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. The only opinion that's really important is your own. And it sounds very cliche, I know. But once you take time to do that mindset work and really kind of, I call it going into that introspection and looking within to figure out who am I? What do I stand for? What are my, like my core values that I'm not moving on? Then you know who you are. You know the work that you're supposed to do, and then you commit to showing up in that work at 100% every day. And
Mhm.
that's a power. And I'm never going to apologize for how powerful I am. Like,
Come
we're
on.
past that. And I think when you recognize the power that you hold as an individual, especially as a Black woman, like the world was built on our backs, then you're going to move a little bit different. It's like wearing that crown and straightening your crown to remind yourself who you are. And I think sometimes we forget who we are, which I think, as in a professional environment, if you're an entrepreneur, it doesn't matter. Like, keep a brag sheet that you can pull out sometime to remind yourself who you are, but stop giving away your personal power, because you got everything that you need within you, but it's up to you to ignite that passion and that purpose to show up in what you're supposed to be doing and making a difference, because can't nobody do your purpose but
Mhm.
you. But as long as you continue to play small, then guess what? That's what you're going to get back. If you're hanging around people that are complaining constantly, they crying broke, they're operating from a scarcity mindset, you're going to get broke, because you run around with broke people. If you lay with dogs, you're going to get fleas. Like, you are only as strong as your weakest link. So I think people have to take a step back and realize that you have a certain power within you, but it's up to you to kind of cultivate that, to spark that light, to not, use your light to warm others. Like, you can warm somebody else up and not dim their light. And if you are dimming lights, then you got some insecurities that you need to work on. But I think you have to have that awareness of who you are as a person and be unapologetic about the power that you hold. I'm not saying run around being cocky or any of that, but there's a difference between confidence and arrogance, and it's all about how you show up. So,
Yes.
own your power and show up and
I
stop
love it.
playing small.
So listen, if a person says, I need everything that she just gave, right? How can they find you? Because I need the people to know exactly, where they can go find you online, because they need this energy and they need that
Yes.
light that you're bringing to them. Tell them where to find you.
Sure. So I am Dr. Shinika McKiever on all the social platforms. LinkedIn is where I play the most. I'm Shinika McKiever. I think comma PhD there, but just type my name in, you'll find me, or Google me. I'll come up. My business website is www.themckievergroup.com. But like I said, if you Google my name, everything should come up. And yeah, I would love for you guys to reach out to me. I also do a weekly series called Spark Sessions with Dr. Shinika. She said I'll be sending you some information so I can get you
Hit
lined
it.
up for 2023, where we address a lot of these things that Black women entrepreneurs and professionals deal with. And I'm running a special through the end of the year for a strategy session. So if you go on my website, you can sign up for it. And yeah, give me a follow. And then my last shout out is, like I said, I'm really big about building the spaces I want to see. So next Sunday, December 11th, we are having our first event for the Brown Girl Collective, which is professional network for brown and black women in the triad at Stock and Grain in High Point from 11 to 2. So if you're available, would love for you to come out. This is kind of, the interest of meeting to see if people really want, a professional group. And if they do, we're going to have some great things lined up in 2023. So I would love to see you guys there. Stock and Grain on December 11th from 11 to 2.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being on. We appreciate it. And, I think that this has been a powerful conversation that we've been able to pack a lot into 30
Yes.
minutes. And I know I could have probably even tore it apart even more, with all of the great stuff that you said. But I definitely think that people can take this, they can get that little spark, and then they can make the decision of, listen, these are two chicks that are out here that are doing it
Right.
and that are about this life of, helping other people to feel empowered, which
Right.
then turns into them actually being empowered. And we definitely want you to keep creating. So thank you so much for being on the show. Everybody else, if you're watching on the replay, make sure that you share. You can still leave comments after it is over. And, this is just a great opportunity for us to make sure that you always come on out, show up and show out, and continue to give it to the people. Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you for having me.
Thank you too.